Welcome back to the channel for another edition of Diamond Star Stories featuring the cards from the 1934 to 1936 Diamond Star set. Today's player is none other than pitcher Fred Frankhouse, pictured here pitching for the Boston Braves at the time this card was created, which followed his only All-Star appearance in 1934. This is a 1935 edition, and let's jump into a little bit about his career. Fred was born in 1904 in Port Royal, Pennsylvania, where he actually returned later on in life and spent much of his time after his retirement, and passed away in 1989. So he lived a pretty long life. He also passed away in Pennsylvania as well. During his time in major leagues, he actually was signed right out of high school, played minor league ball for a few years, and actually debuted with the St. Louis Cardinals in 1927. Went down to the minors again shortly thereafter, and eventually was mainstay for the team that and he got moved on to the Boston Braves and finished his career with the Dodgers, and he played from 1927 all the way to 1939. You can find cards of him throughout this period. This is probably maybe his much more eye-catching one of all the ones that are available for purchase. He was a very serviceable pitcher during his time. He won 106 games and losing 97 for a WAR of 18.4. His career ERA was 3.92. The only time he ever led the league in any category was for giving up earned runs. His best season probably was in 34, where he was selected to the All-Star team and actually received a few MVP votes. He was 17-9, had a 3.20 ERA. Oddly enough, he struck out only 78 batters during that season and had 13 complete games. He was known for throwing a nice curveball during his time, but towards the end of his career, he was accused often of throwing spitballs, including one incident in 1939 in which Ernie Lombardi struck out on a spitball and accused him of throwing a spitball. And in retaliation, he struck the next batter that was up and actually knocked him out. He even got a warning from the commissioner at one point because it was suspected that he was throwing spitballs and told he would get a lengthy suspension if he got caught doing it again. Some of the highlights of his career, he was part of the 28 World Series team for the Cardinals that lost to the Yankees, but he did not appear. He didn't make an appearance in that World Series. He pitched in Babe Ruth's final game. He was the pitcher on the Boston Braves side when Babe Ruth played his final game with the Braves. Those are probably more of his larger highlights during his time throughout of his career. A pretty serviceable pitcher, as I mentioned before. Once his career was over, he enlisted into the Army during World War II and moved up to the rank of captain. After the war, he returned to his hometown and started a Christmas tree farm and also started a Little League team. And he was later inducted into the Pennsylvania Hall of Fame and has a field named after him in his hometown. So that's about it. During his post-career, he did spend a little time as a coach and slash pitcher in the minor leagues before he actually enlisted for a couple seasons with the Yankee organization. But other than that, he wasn't affiliated with Major League Baseball following the time he returned from World War II. And that's it. That is the Fred Frankhouse background. Here he is, obviously pictured in the Diamond Star card, in the dugout here. Obviously the photo is him looking at the camera, probably from the dugout. And the artist obviously kind of replicated that in the way they designed the picture. What I think is kind of interesting about this is the red that they kind of try to use to be able to represent the Braves uniform at that time. It actually looks more orange, and so does the field itself, which is kind of an interesting thing because like in some other cards, red seems to stand out a little bit more as like more traditional red. So that's one of the more interesting features of this card. And on the back, here it is. He's part of 35. So in this case, he has stats from 34 that are listed on there, where he won 17 and lost 9, as I mentioned earlier. And it was printed in green ink with this one. So they talk a little bit about him throwing a curveball and kind of linked a little bit to discussion briefly with the late John McGraw in this one too, when he kind of talked about the assets of having a curveball pitcher on your team that can obviously create a lot of ground balls and pop-ups when you need them. This is a very nice copy, although it got the OC designation. That's fine with me, but it has really sharp corners and edges, which kind of lended itself to being graded at 6 at the time that this card was graded. And these are some of the cards I think are some of the gems that I'm able to pick up for the set because it wasn't all that costly because it was a common card. but definitely add to the overall eye appeal of the entire set when you're putting them in close proximity of cards that may have lower grades. It kind of helps booster it up a little bit in my mind when you see some cards that are still super sharp and mixed in with ones that are not so much, which is the case for some of my Hall of Famers. But that's it for Fred. I'll be back with November with another video. I think it's going to probably time to return to the Hall of Fame with my next one. And I think I'm going to use Roger Hornsby as my next example to kind of commemorate the year anniversary of me owning that card, which is another OC designation, but it's one of the best looking cards in my collection period. So I will see you again soon.